story time about how I was able to turn a single interview into 12 short form clips, right? Now, if you just want to know the moral of the story, that is to trust yourself, remain fluid, and know that being a creative and a strategist is a strong suit that we need to lean into. Now, let's get into the story. About sometime last week, I got a phone call from an associate of mine that I met at a chamber event sometime last year, who's a digital marketer. He called me up about doing a project where the end client would end up being a local psychiatrist, right? I'm already interested, right? Mental health, overall well-being, all that good stuff. And so what he knew for sure is that he wanted an interview produced of her / with her. Cool beans, I'm all for that, right? That's my forte, I love it. And my understanding is that I was essentially being brought in as a technician, and he would be the one producing the whole thing. And so I call him up just to get some more details so I could better understand how I can be of support rather than just showing up as a technician or as a camera op. I wanted to get the full understanding of what will be happening so I can better prepare myself to be an asset to the overall production. And so he knew for sure he wanted an interview done. All right, cool. What is this interview for? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked him, so it's essentially a brand story video.
Correct.
Who's asking questions?
I would probably be asking them. I'm doing the final questions tonight. So, but I don't need to be on the screen. So like when I ask a question, she can just be in there as well.
So you're not going to be on set?
No, I'm going to be there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. Yep.
All right, bet. That's my thing. I like to tell these stories. I like to capture them. I like to empower those to share who they are and what they do and how they benefit our community. So bet, I'm all for it. But even in him saying, yeah, it seems a bit iffy, right? He seems a bit hesitant about exactly what he wanted outside of, I want to shoot this interview. And so I decided that going into this, since I was uncertain, right? If you're uncertain, I'm uncertain. I knew for sure that I wanted to keep as small of a kit as possible, especially since I'll be moving about by myself. And as quiet as it kept, we don't really highlight the fact that this job that we do is actually manual labor. Yeah, we get to be creative, but it's all manual labor. And so I knew I wanted to keep my kit as small as possible. And so I decided the best way for me to be able to do that was to only do a single camera setup, B-roll. You're going to ask the questions. You also need me to edit. Right? By doing a single camera setup, now that means I don't have to bring an additional tripod. Or at least I get to leave that in my trunk unless, it's absolutely necessary for me to bring it out. That's when I'll be able to do it because they'll be on hand. All right, boom. So now, one tripod, bet. We one stick down. Okay, cool. Now, when it comes to audio, I decided to do a single audio kit. Now, that's something I advise against. And so really, it's not really a single audio. I decided to get a bit creative with my audio and I would not be booming a microphone overhead. And so by not booming a microphone overhead, that meant now I get to eliminate 2 additional sticks, right? One would be the boom pole and the other would be the light stand that I typically use to boom my boom pole, right? I usually just have a light stand with a grip head and then I use that to boom my mic overhead. And so now I eliminated 2 more sticks. Bet. We getting this kit smaller already. And I get into a bit deeper what I decided to do with the audio later on in this video. I just want to paint a picture for you. Now, when it comes to lighting, y'all know how I feel about lighting. I could not skimp out on that at all. And so I still decided to keep my kit small, which is me bringing in my traditional lighting that I do anyway, which meant I would have a key light. It meant I would have a backlight or a hair light, and I will also have a reflector instead of bringing a light for the fill. And so what I ended up bringing for that was my Amaranth 200X my Amaran P60C, and of course my 5-in-1 reflector for the fill. And so by sheer numbers alone, that meant 3 sticks already for the lighting, plus 1 for the tripod. That's 4 sticks. And typically I would bring those 4, an additional tripod, my boom pole, as well as another light stand. So now I'm only bringing 4 sticks to get this look that I would need for the interview, rather than bringing a total of 7. And so that helped me to get my kit to be a bit smaller, right? Boom. Now I know the gear that I'm bringing. I understand that I'm shooting an interview. Let's get to it. Let's go do it. Just arrived on site. And of course, it's a medical practice, because like I said, it's for a psychiatrist. I show up on site, and the area we got to set up production is in a conference room. Now, you know, conference rooms, whether it's in a medical facility or at a hotel, they're not typically the best looking spaces. And that's where we're forced to be a bit more creative in creating something that will be appealing to the eye, to the end user. All right, cool beans. I go scope out the place. I decide where I want to set up my camera. I get my angle right. And I want to say, you know, I want to interject here to highlight that I decided to shoot this a bit wider than I normally would. And I decided to give a bit more headroom than I normally would for corporate interviews. Also, I decided to place the talent closer to the center than I normally would. So still in the third, so that we could have the looking room and the leading room, but not so much on the third that the backside will be cut off, right? Should we decide to crop in, which is a benefit of shooting in 4K and delivering in 1080p. So these are all the things that's going on through my mind. If I need to punch in on a 4K, it's still enough space around when I'm cutting into the headroom and I'm cutting in on the side, so I could punch in and it still looks good, right? So boom, I set my camera up. I got everything right. I used the digital marketer, my point of contact from the chamber that brought me in. I used him as a talent just so I could roughly get my composition properly. And so that when the psychiatrist came in, it was already 90% of the way done. Cool. I get my camera right. I get my composition right. And I go on to set up my lighting. Now, for me, I like to motivate the sun if there's big windows in the room rather than fight against it. And plus, I didn't bring enough lights anyway to be able to compete with the sun. And why compete when y'all could just work together anyway? And so I decided to set my key light up right near the window. And so because it was a cloudy day and the clouds were moving back and forth, that would have caused changes in my actual image, which is what happened. But luckily that was towards the end of the actual interview. And so I set up my key light, and I want to ask y'all a question. When y'all are setting up your key light with your modifiers, do you put your light on a light stand and then add the modifier? Or do you put your light inside of the modifier and then put it on the light stand? Because I was struggling a bit here, and I decided to go with the latter, and it might be something that I do going forward. All right, let me get back on track. So I got my key light set up and I got my camera set up, but now I have to decide what I'm going to do about the plain walls in the space. And so naturally, I decided to use my Amaran P60C as a backlight rather than explicitly as a here light. And that's one of the benefits of having such a light in your kit, because it's small, it's portable, and you have the whole RGB spectrum. Now, for this particular medical practice, one of their brand colors are green. And so I decided to just use the Amaran P60C to hit that back wall with a little bit of green. And so that allowed for me to have a more appealing image at the end of it, right? Now, it's contrasty on the side of the talent's face. And so, of course, you know what I used? My 5-in-1 reflector to bring up those shadows. And so putting all of these different elements together allowed for me to get an image that will allow for me to later go on and edit in and have that punch in and punch out. And before I move on, I want to briefly talk about the audio setup that I decided to use. Because I did not use a boom pole And because I believe that you should always have some type of redundancy, specifically when it comes to your audio, I decided to go with the DJI mic. Now, this DJI mic is the original, not the 2. And so what I ended up doing was taking the DJI mic receiver and plugging it directly into my camera. And then with the transmitter, I decided to put a lav mic in there and then put that on my talent. Note that the lav mic is always going to sound better than just a pack alone. So now I got that set up on her, and then with the other transmitter, I actually just plugged my Rode Video Mic Pro Plus into that and kept it right on top of my camera. Now, obviously, that was just for redundancy. It was just for backup audio, because that mic being so far away from her wasn't going to do much in terms of actual quality, but we do have different AI tools that could have come in clutch if it was absolutely needed. So, with all of this being said, for my audio kit, I now have 3 sources of audio without having to boom a mic overhead. The 3 sources would be the one that's going directly into the camera. It would be from the transmitter number 1, which I recorded directly to, and transmitter number 2, which I also recorded directly to. So I will always have those WAV files to edit later in case something went wrong with the audio going back to the camera. And just as a side note, I ended up using the WAV file from the audio with the lav anyway, because the preamps and those are presumably better than the preamp inside of my camera. And I didn't mention this before, but my camera is an FX30 by Sony, of course, because that's my primary camera that I use for my different productions. In fact, I'm using it right now. So we went through the whole spiel already. Now we got everything set up from the camera, the audio, and the lighting. And now it's just time for the actual interview to take place. So we have the producer, he's asking all the questions. Okay. Because before she even came in, I asked him about the question that he was going to ask and the flow of it. And I also gave a little information on how I typically handle these interviews for my own brand story videos that I'm producing. And so we had that brief conversation beforehand. And so now during the actual interview, and he's asking those different questions. And the questions are quite compelling. And the information is informative. And so I just want to say she was a natural when it came to giving the information. And she made it so easy to keep track of what was happening and the information that was being given. And I don't know if it's because of her personality or because she's knowledgeable in the field, or maybe even because she's passionate about what it is that she's speaking about. But great job, Doc. Great job. So they're having their spiel. They're doing their back and forth. And I want to say, don't be afraid to interject.
I will. Yeah.
My apologies.
But
you just rephrase the question. So, because once I cut Rico's voice out, I need your answer to be able to stand alone.
Got it. All right.
I know that I was there as a technician, but I'm also watching with the eye of a strategist. So don't be afraid to interject if need be. Don't be afraid to cut someone off, because you will hate for the entire interview to go through and you realize, dang, she didn't rephrase the questions back in the answer. So now when his voice get cut out, the viewer may not understand what she's talking about. It's going to make it that much more difficult for the editor. And I think that's one of the bright sides of having been an editor, or to understand editing principles, is that when you are producing different types of content, whether you're editing it or not, you have the eye and the mind to know what would make the editor's job more beneficial, easier rather. And so don't be afraid to interject. And so the questions are flowing, the answers are flowing, and it's more of a conversation. But at the end of it, I realized this may not be something that could particularly be used as a part of a brand story video. And it might be better off being chopped up into standalone pieces that can be uploaded to different social media platforms so that she could promote herself and work on developing her personal brand. And so that's what we ended up doing. We ended up taking that 1 hour interview and chopping it up to multiple pieces, which ended up being about a dozen or so different clips that can be posted throughout the duration of a month or a week or 2 weeks, and that she can use to build her personal brand that they can possibly use to run ads behind. And each of the video had a call to action. Hey, if you're looking for some help with your mental health, be sure to visit this website and you can search for XYZ or this person, and I'll be more than willing to assist you, right? And so that's how a 1-hour interview turned into 12 different pieces of social media clips. And I want to reiterate, the moral of this story is to remain flexible, to remain open-minded, to lean into your thought process as a creative and as a strategist. Do not overexert yourself. If you're unsure about what could be, just think about what would be the best methods for you to deliver on that end product. And so that's one of the reasons I decided to shoot a bit wider and have a bit headroom, because one, I'll be able to punch in with the 4K, especially if delivering at 1080p. And then on top of that, because I had the extra headroom, that meant I would then be allowed to, or have enough room to deliver the files both in horizontal as well as in vertical, because the Sony FX30 do not shoot open gate. And so that was one of the benefits of having that forethought. And at the end of it, everyone's happy with the final product because of that flexibility, which may not have been there if I wasn't thinking ahead about the actual goals of this project or what it could be or how it could be beneficial. And so you just got to lean into that and understand that you are the expert in your field. You are the one that's constantly learning and growing and digging deeper into this particular industry. It's not that other person. That other person may not understand what all goes into it, but it's up to you to know, and it's up to you to enforce what needs to be enforced and to set expectations so that everyone's happy at the end. And so I want to thank you for sticking around with me here in this video. I know it could seem like it was a bit all over the place, and maybe it seems as if I didn't have an actual purpose. I just wanted to let you in on this story time, on this experience that I just had, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it and incorporate it in your own projects.
The most rewarding thing for me is when I am able to see someone actually get better. There are times where people have just, terminal illnesses or things of that nature, and being able to just kind of help somebody through that and understand, allow them to understand that they're not alone in that, and I am helping them through, even though I might not be able to fix what is going on, but it's helpful to me to know that I am doing my best to make somebody else's life better. And a lot of times it's not just the patient that's in front of me, but then also their families and all of those things, and just kind of working together with them and just seeing a transformation. So I went into this because I wanted to help people, and I love that aspect of it, and I love what I do on a day-to-day basis.